Bill O'Reilly and his guests are going to mock the idea of polyfamilies. So, in other words, it's not like, one man and one woman or one man and one man or whatever. It's like a bunch of different people in a bunch of different relationships at the same time together. So it's like multiple open relationships or marriages at once. It's actually really interesting. So let's listen to O'Reilly and his buddies discuss it, and then I want to go ahead and explain why, to me, this segment highlights one of the biggest differences between conservatives and liberals.
Polyfamilies, which means multiple partners in one home interacting with one another. NBC News featured a situation in Atlanta where 3 men and 2 women are raising one child.
You two are married, and you sleep together. You two are dating, and sleep together. You two are dating, and sleep together. And you two are dating, and sleep together.
Yeah.
How is this not awkward?
If somebody said, describe your family to me, I would say, there's 2 dads, 1 mom, and 1 person dating another person.
It's a lot to keep track of.
Not really.
If you had to explain it to someone with absolutely no context, what is being poly?
More laundry.
Yeah, it's being open to the idea that you don't have to have just that one, that you can accept more people into your life.
You have one of your sons who doesn't approve.
He left home and never came back.
Did that make you think maybe this isn't worth it? My son doesn't want to be a part of this.
I had chalked it up to being a teenager. And it's like, oh, he'll be back.
Here now to analyze Gutfeld and McGurk. So, Gutfeld, you might remember I predicted this would happen in the beginning of the inclusive marriage movement.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that with any derision, so you left-wing websites and just, sitting out there in the weeds. But it's a logical progression. When you went on and include everyone under the banner of matrimony, that you're going to have this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think it's healthy for the kids, you say?
The worst part about it is that all the adults are unattractive. But I get your slippery slope argument. First it's gay marriage, then cats will marry fish and adopt seahorses.
You're going to get in trouble for that. You got it.
No, I'm joking. I think it's beautiful. I think families come in all shapes. I myself live with 4 ferrets in a treehouse. The state won't recognize the relationship. I consider us married. We're planning a ceremony. You won't be invited because you will scare the animals. Point is here is the media has no ability to judge anything. Everything.
Well, not only the media, nobody should judge anything.
Yeah, exactly. Everything that is odd is considered normal, and anything normal is odd.
No, see, here's the thing, Greg. There's no reason to judge the situation that they're living in. That's the thing. Look, I have no problem, as everybody knows who listens to this show. I mean, I'm considered a progressive, and I have no problem making judgments all day long. Just they should be smart judgments, and judgments that make sense and are appropriate, okay? Like I always say, there's a big difference between judging and prejudging. So judging is totally fine and normal, and it's based on evidence, okay? So, for example, if somebody commits a crime 3 or 4 times or whatever it happens to be, robbery or assault or whatever, I say, yes, I'm going to judge that person, and I'm either judging them as having some sort of a mental problem that's leading to their aggression, or I'm just judging them as a bad person. They have a bad moral character or whatever. There's a difference between doing that, that's judging, and prejudging, which is exactly what they're doing with this idea of polyfamilies. They're just dismissing it from the jump, and they're saying, well, this is not like what we're used to, so it has to be wrong. Which leads to my second point here, which is that this is one of my main pet peeves on the show, and I've spoken about it before. The longtime listeners know exactly what I'm talking about. I call it a cultural bias. What Greg Gutfeld has, what Bill O'Reilly has, what honestly most conservatives have, there's a few that are smart enough to rise above it, but what most of them have is this thing called a cultural bias, where they say wrongly, okay, well, look, I like my life, and I like my family and my friends, and I like the situation and the culture that I grew up in. So therefore, my beliefs and my culture are right, and other cultures are wrong. Now, why is that so silly? Well, it's obvious because it's a cultural bias. Just because you grew up in a certain scenario that you liked doesn't mean that there aren't other possible scenarios that are equally as pleasant and that people would like, or maybe even preferable to your scenario. And also, of course, that there could be scenarios that are worse off. There's no doubt about that. But the idea that these guys have is they're convinced. They're convinced, like, this is that. I mean, they're not normal. They're silly for doing it. Well, why? Why is that bad, though? Why is it something that we should cast a moral judgment on when there is no moral angle to that kind of a thing? And by the way, that's the type of situation that humans were in throughout the majority of human history. So they're actually doing what was the commonplace for the longest time when human beings were in hunter-gatherer situations throughout most of human history. That's what we did, because it was the best way we could assure survival of the species. So that's what I call the cultural bias, this idea that I don't even need to hear the details of anything that's different. I know it's wrong because it's different from what I'm used to. And that's what I think is the biggest difference between conservatives and liberals. That conservatives, they just have this no mentality. No, if it's not like 1950s and Leave It to Beaver with the white picket fence and 2 kids and the dog and the wife that stays home and the husband that's out making money. No, I don't want to hear about it. No, 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 no. And smart people look at that and go, oh, you're so silly. Oh, you're such a child in the way you think that you can't even perceive of a possible living scenario that could be equal to yours that's different. So that's my main beef with this. And there's 2 other points I want to make. One is when Greg Gutfeld's comparing it to bestiality. Look, I don't know if he's kidding. If he's kidding, whatever. He's trying to be funny and he's not. That's what Greg Gutfeld always does. But if he seriously is comparing it to bestiality, that's idiotic. Because, like I always say, the standard is consenting adults. As long as it's consenting adults, I'm totally fine with it. And of course, bestiality does not fall into that. Pedophilia does not fall into that. That's where they always try to take the slippery slope argument to, well, obviously, soon people are going to fucking try to marry an emu. Obviously. Well, no, because how can an emu consent? You know, this isn't consenting adults we're talking about here. That's outside of that realm. Pedophilia, same thing. Not an adult. So nobody's arguing for that. Nobody would argue for that, okay? So that's not an apt analogy and comparison. That's what they tried to do with gay marriage. And the final thing I'll say is, when O'Reilly makes the point that, well, I argued from the beginning there's going to be a logical progression, you know, and what's coming next is polygamy or this, polyfamilies, whatever they call it. I think he's right about that. But the difference is, I think he's right about that, and that's fine. He thinks he's right about that, and that's bad. But that's not bad. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different living scenario. Nobody's getting hurt. There's no victim. There's nothing wrong here.